Welcome to the show. We're finally doing it. We're going to do the big lettering stream today. I've been talking about it for ages. How are you? Welcome to the show. I know it's the first stream of the week on a Thursday, which is not how I initially wanted this week's schedule to work out, but I have to apologise for that. It's definitely been one of those weeks where other things just got in the way, but that's behind us now. I am going to bring up Clip Studio Paint. I'm actually working on this page just now. This will be a lettering stream, but I just noticed that there are a couple of elements in this first panel that I forgot to fill in with the black areas. Specifically, Sadie's tights aren't filled in this panel, so that needs to be fixed very quickly, and then we can get right on to lettering, but this is only going to take us a second. So yeah, I hope you're all having a good week. I can't believe it is the 1st of October already. We are now well into autumn, or fall if you will, whichever you prefer. And just a couple of little things here that we need to get rid of. There we go. Right, we're going to get right into it. I've got 2 pages here, 2 most recent pages that we've finished largely on stream. This is page 21, and we also have page 22. And I'm currently working on page 23, but we're a long way off from lettering that. So we also have the mock-up speech bubbles, which don't look very good there once everything's filled in, but you can see how initially at the storyboard stage, one of the things that I do is, and we've spoken about this on stream before, is I'll just throw down some crude speech bubbles, very roughly sort of try to figure out how much text is going to be in each one, and that helps with just figuring out the how to stage each panel. They're not always going to be 100% accurate, because once we actually get the proper speech bubbles laid down, we're going to tighten them up. Everything's going to be a lot more concise, whereas those are all done by hand. And spacing on this, by default the spacing is very cramped. turn off anti-aliasing, I think. I think we're going to change this to... No, maybe we don't need to. Maybe we can just do it as a single line and then it won't be so bad. I'm trying to think of how to use the space we have in the most economical version. Okay, what we'll do is duplicate that, and we'll go in and we'll add the boxes and the speech bubbles afterwards. We're just going to try and get the placement down of the text before we add the speech bubbles. Set the justification correctly. And it's something that you can see how I was thinking about this at the layout stage. The reason there's all this dead space at the bottom of the page here is because I knew that this was going to be a very wordy panel with a bit of back and forth between Karen and Sadie. So something that was taken into consideration very early on, and that's why there's a bit of real estate at the bottom of the page. And really I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to place the text in such a way that makes the most use of that space and obscures the art as little as possible, although we're going to block some of it off. But you know how much I sort of agonise over every aspect of every panel, so ideally we can use this blank space as much as possible and still have the speech bubbles structured in the most elegant way as well. That's the idealized version of this that we're trying to achieve. Anyway, okay, what we're going to do is, instead of laying down the speech bubbles, we're going to hold off on that. We'll just add all the text in one go, because that's probably the most efficient way of doing this. And then we'll have some idea about what the page is going to look like. We can still go back and amend all these speech bubbles as well. Nothing here is set in stone yet. And I would love to tell you that I cut down the amount of text in the second panel because the first one was so wordy. Unfortunately, I did not. This one is going to be about the same, because Corinne's not saying much, but Sadie is. Pull this back in so I can see it again, because it's such a wordy panel, a wordy speech bubble, I mean. I'm going to change this to, I don't want any of them to hear this, and then that'll help to You know what, I don't think we need in this school, I think it's implied. Also, I don't want them hearing this. I'm always looking for ways to just tighten up that dialogue. You know, it's a case of don't use 10 words of 7 if you can say it in 7, and don't use 7 if you can say it in 5. And don't use 5 if you can say it in 3. And contractions help. I think when you say come after an attack would work just as well. Or even you even need to say I tried to attack because they did attack her. She attacked me. Leave that there. Okay, now we have all the text for the page laid down. We can still tweak it, and we will. What we're going to do next is we're going to go in. And in fact, that's what we're going to do. We're going to take each piece of text one at a time. For this first caption box, I'm going to make a new layer. There's a couple of different ways that you could do this, but one way to do it is I'll just fill that with black. Shrink it by, I might need to fiddle with this, try about 15 pixels. No, that might be too big, try 10. I think 10 might do. And we'll fill the inner area, there we go. And then we'll go back up to the text layer and use the arrow keys to just move that into place. So that's about center. Okay, I actually don't like the I don't think we need the bold. I'm going to take the bold away. That's going to shrink down the size of the box, or it's going to leave a lot of real estate there. So pull that to the side a bit. There we go. Resize that. Okay, we're going to move up now, or move down now, and use the speech bubble tool, which I don't think is visible on stream, but on the toolbox we should have the balloon button, or you can hit the T button on your keyboard and that will bring up your balloon dialog box, which you can see on the top left side of the screen. Subtool balloon, and I prefer the rounded balloon myself. Okay, that obviously is a bit off center, but we can then go back down to the text button. And we can move it about a bit. So actually, I think what we should do is we should undo that, because what I'd like to do is... Oh, have I gone too far? I just realised that the caption box at the top is gone. Oh, somehow that got... Let's go back up again. Okay, something's going wrong there. Okay, I'm going to do this again. Go. Right, we're going to go back down to say these first bit of dialogue, and we're going to highlight it. And again, it doesn't come up on screen because it's in a separate window, so you can't see this on the stream, but I'm going into the subtool detail window, and just tweaking the character spacing a bit. And the line space, that's too much. But a little bit of line space like that is good. Just give the text a little bit of breathing room. Again, that's slightly off center. I like to have a little bit of breathing room in the speech bubble, so nothing is ever butted right up against the bubble. This one is a bit maybe too squarish, but okay, given the limitations of this particular panel and how much we need to cram in, maybe we can work with that. Again, this might need to going to come in there and give that apostrophe just a little bit of space so that it doesn't sort of just smoosh into the letter. And we're always looking for that, just any instance where maybe the letters sort of butt up against each other. Especially if you think it's going to really affect legibility. As an example, that the apostrophe that was hitting the V there, you know, because of the nature of those characters, they, in this particular font, they ended up being too tight together, whereas between the N and the apostrophe and the T and didn't. That's okay, so you can work with that. I think that maybe I just need to pull this slightly to the side, just fractionally. We won't add the tail just now, we'll worry about that afterwards. Let's just concentrate on getting the placement right on these. And get the letters exactly the way that we want them. Okay, I'm a little bit concerned that this last speech bubble on this page, in this panel, how it's gonna, well, the amount of space it's gonna take up and how it's gonna fit with every other element on this panel. I'm trying to space them out so that the panels, so there's some consistency in terms of the placement of the speech bubble. So if there's a lot bit breathing room on one side, then it'll be balanced on the other side as well. Not a huge deal, not something probably that a lot of people would even notice, but I think it definitely helps to make the panel a bit more aesthetically pleasing. So we've still got this big space down here, but we're going to use that, and you'll see why in a second. First of all, we're going to go back up to this to Sadie's first bit of dialogue here, and we're going to choose the balloon tail option. And it definitely needs to be a straight one, I think, by direct tail there. And ideally you would have the tail and the speech bubble pointing right up at the character's mouth, so if you see in this direction it's almost going straight up to where Sadie's mouth would be, so that's where the sound is coming from. Which sounds kind of obvious because, I mean, as long as you would think as long as it's pointing anywhere in Sadie's general direction it would be fine, but ideally you want it to line up as close with the mouth so it's like a straight line right up there, you know. Again, with Corinne's first bubble, we did the same sort of thing. Point towards where the mouth is. And we don't need a tail for Sadie's second panel. What we need to do is make a connected sort of section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer above the speech bubbles here. This is the way that I like to do it, in Clip Studio Paint at least, is sort of might need to, using a tablet like I am, it might take you a couple of strokes to get the shape exactly the way you want it to get nice and fluid, but make a shape like that. It's a bit like what we did with the caption box at the very top of the panel, where you fill it all in black like that, and then select it, shrink it. Again, we'll try about 10 pixels, and that might be too small. Five pixels I think will do. That's too far in the other direction. Seven. And then we fill it with white. I think 7 will do. And then we can just get rid of that. Get rid of the excess. Make sure you don't miss any spots because that could really mess up your lettering. And actually I think it's still a bit too thin. We can go back in over that. Ideally you won't have to do this. As far as I know, there's no native way to do that in Clip Studio Paint, is to have the connecting sort of elements between bubbles. Definitely something that I would like to see in a future revision of the software, unless I'm missing it and there's a way to do it, but I don't see it in the options. No, I don't like it. That particular one is too crude, and I don't normally need to go in and make embellishments like that afterwards. So here's another way of doing it. Again, different methods. But that one I feel is maybe a little bit too crude looking. But you could do it by hand like that, and especially if you only have the space between two shorter panels, it's going to look alright. In this case, because the tail needs to be a bit longer, I think we need to take a different approach. So here's another way of doing it, is just to, on a new layer above your speech bubbles, again just create a circle using your selection tool or an ellipse, whatever you want to say. Fill it with black, shrink it down. 7's too small. I was going to leave too small of a circle. 1, 2. Make sure that the border is thick enough, so you may need to vary the number depending on the size of your canvas as well, but then we can go into that and delete that. You can duplicate it, so now we've got 2, and you can move that about to just have 2 intersecting. Sets of lines. This is just another way of doing it, achieving the same aim. Then we'll merge the 2. And we could fill this with white actually, but in this case we don't even really need to. I think just because it's a plain white background anyway, what we could do is we merge these 2 sort of circles or ellipses that we've made. And we have 2 nice smooth lines that are going to connect our 2 speech bubbles. And again we go back in over the excess parts, and hopefully we don't miss any spots. now we have two sort of tail sections that are going to connect these. We can go with the white pen and just draw over these two parts. Again, that's not exactly what I wanted in terms of size and thickness of it. Might be a bit too much, but I don't want to be needlessly picky. It's a very awkward panel because I just don't know about that curve, to be honest with you. We could, another way of doing it is you don't need to even have the two lines be a curve. You could just do, and this is almost like the most simple version of it. Just do it as two lines like that, but I think it might work better if we just do it like that, and we'll go in. And again, just white out the excess parts that we don't want. Just like we would if we were making a comic the old-fashioned way, pen and paper, just where you would take some, if you had an area on the page that you don't like, you would just white it out. See, that is, I wouldn't normally just draw a line straight like that, but kind of works actually, and it draws less attention to itself than the curve did. I think the curve was almost taking up too much real estate. I'm using the term real estate a lot in this stream today. Okay, we gotta get going because we've only got about, what, 20 minutes left on stream? And we haven't even, we've done one panel in terms of actually getting the bubbles completed, so that panel's finished. That one's done, so we'll move on. Oh. Panel a little bit of give the panel a little bit of breathing room, so that it's not right, you know, hitting right on the top of the panel. If we can do it like that, that's going to be better. Right about in the middle there, that kind of sweet spot between the very top panel border and say these heads. There's a little bit of space all the way around. I'm fairly happy with that first speech bubble there, so we can just add the tail and we're done with it. I think I'm gonna just bold the word secluded there. And I'm also gonna go in and just yeah, a little bit more space between those lines. Okay, move this over just a bit while we're working on this panel, and then we can move it back. I think that's going to be sometimes I have to be generous with the amount of space I'm going to give, but that is too much. See, there's too much real estate there. Too much. There's that term again. There's too much space being taken up there on the top of the bottom. I think what we need to do is square the panel off a little bit more. And again, I think we can use the extra bit of line spacing just to expand that out a bit like that. Again, giving careful consideration to choosing which words you want to bold in a speech bubble, if any, just to give it a little bit of special emphasis. And you can see that Sadie uses them a lot more than Corinne does, because Corinne's a bit more passive, at least in this particular scene. Sadie is the one who's driving the story forward, driving the conversation, and is a lot more dramatic. And once that's don't is boldened, again the apostrophe kind of smooshes into the other letters, so giving it a little bit of extra space, it's a bit more legible. And again, with that sort of connected tail, that one's a bit better. If we just fill it out like that, hopefully. Oh, I missed a spot. I think that one's going to look pretty good, and then we can go in and delete that. Regrets, I've had a few. One of them is that I was sure that when we added the speech bubbles for this panel, they would cover up Sadie's weird proportions here, because there was going to be so much speech, so much text. I thought, well, I'm not happy with this. Sadie's legs, I don't know, just look off. They're not scaled relative to the size of her body. And I was convinced that it's going to be okay, John, because it's all going to get covered up anyway. And here we go. It didn't work out like that at all. So, you win some, you lose some. Okay, well anyway, let's move on and we'll try and finish off this this page anyway. I don't think we're going to get to letter. Well, we're definitely not going to get to letter two panels. 2 panels on the stream today. So I think what we're going to do is tomorrow we'll do comic book lettering stream 2. Not that these are the first lettering streams we've ever done, but the first one's in a long time. So I don't like that. Again, too much space above and beneath the panels. Sometimes using the tool in Clip Studio Paint to create your bubbles, you might need to do it a couple of times before you get a shape that's gonna fit just right. And you also might have to go in and amend the dialogue, either by changing some words or just changing how you've laid out the text, so that you can get a pleasing shape and everything's going to flow correctly. Now on this panel, we're not going to use a connecting tail, and the reason for that is because the two bubbles are so far apart, and Sadie's the only person who's talking anyway, so it's your call really in terms of when you're creating a page, whether you want to have the character just have two separate speech bubbles with two separate tails, or you're going to connect them together. It's really, I think, a case of just using your own judgment about what's going to look good on the page. Okay, that one, that bubble is actually alright. That worked out quite well. ideally, and I haven't really talked about this in stream today, but it is an important aspect of lettering, because of the way that the ellipses bubble that we generally use in comic book lettering works. You're going to want the top line to be one of the shorter ones, and then it's sort of the middle lines in the text are a bit longer, and then shorter again at the bottom. So small, medium, large, medium, small again, if you see what I mean. The lines expand out and then they peter back out. It's going to vary a bit depending on the shape of your bubble and how your text works. Sometimes my blocks of text are actually a bit more squared off. Again, to some degree it's about finding what works for you in terms of your own personal style, the shape and size of the bubbles that you're going to use. But we don't need to have, I don't feel that we need to have these two connect. We don't need to. We could, instead of having that tail, you know, we can make another. I'm just going to show you as an example. Well, I was going to show you, but it won't let me. That's strange. I was going to say we just draw a tail from one end to the other, but for some reason now that layer doesn't let me. Okay, delete that. But you get the idea anyway, that you could have one tail on the top panel. I would say on the top one, and that would, you could have the connecting line that would, I guess, like shoot around Corinne's back here, but that would look a bit awkward, I think. So I would just have two separate speech bubbles, both pointing to Sadie, with their own dedicated tails in this instance. So on this one, on this panel, Sadie's talking off panel just to the side here, obviously because she's in the room with Corinne. There's two different ways you could do this. I think the more modern take would be, since Sadie's off panel, you could just do this as a box, a caption box. But I think my preference is, I'd rather use the speech balloon again. Actually, I'm not sure. It's a bit awkward. I'm just trying to think of the best ways to do this because it's such an awkward shape, and the amount of space that this text takes up on here is it's not ideal. Okay, different ways that we could do this. One thing we could do is use the balloon pen. This is a better example of me actually just giving Sadie a little bit more dialogue here to fill out the panel. I think that's going to look a little bit better, but part of the problem is that the balloon is going to be such an odd long shape. Okay, let's try the ellipse balloon instead, also I don't think that's going to help. No, that's actually worse. See, sometimes it's a process of lettering a page like this is there's a lot of problem solving involved. I still don't like it. Okay, what we're going to do is I don't know if I'm going to commit to this, but for now we'll use the more modern method because I'm just not sure. Well, there we go. Sometimes the simplest approach is the best one. We didn't, as I said, there's two different ways of doing that. We could actually have the speech bubble, say the speech bubble, and have it point off panel, or we could just make it a caption box, which is much more something you see a lot more in modern comics. I mean, I have a bit of an old school approach to this sort of stuff. I don't have a problem with thought bubbles and some other things like that have fallen out of favour nowadays. I'm quite happy to use those sorts of elements or narration captions, things that you don't see as much anymore. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for this particular page anyway, and you can see that there's always a bit of trial and error involved. Sometimes you need to experiment a bit, and you just keep going. It's a lot like the actual illustration elements of creating a comic book page. Sometimes you chip away at things and things don't look right, so you just have to keep going. So that's going to do it for today's Club Corbie. That's been about an hour. I can't believe it took us now. I thought I would need to have at least 2 pages here first letter, because I thought we would fly through both of them so quickly, and in actual fact it's taken us the full stream today just to do the 1 page. But hey, it's still it's a much quicker part of the process than actually drawing the art anyway, so there's that. So that's going to do it for today's stream. I hope that you will join me tomorrow, and same time, same place. We should end up doing the next panel, the next page, sorry, which is page 22, which we did a lot of work on stream recently, and you can see that's the finalized art, or should be finalized. And what we're going to do is do the lettering for that, and behind the scenes I'm also working on page 23 as well. So the agonizing step-by-step approach of getting these pages done. We're very slowly moving forward, and I want to thank you for watching today's stream, and hope that you will join me on the next edition of Club Corbie.